things that are questioned about whether or not that should have been discussed with the board, and I'm just wondering, are we still questioning that, or is there an understanding around that yet?
I think there's ambiguity amongst on what the statute really says and whose obligation it is. So I think if we get to a point where we're doing something with RISE, I fully plan to engage the board in a conversation about it.
Could we, and I appreciate that, I just wonder if there could be at least just a friendly agreement that for right now, since there is ambiguity, that we not issue guidance on those gray areas until we get a chance to talk about it, because of when we're saying we want to do things in transparency, that I think would strengthen that.
I don't have any changes to 2.0. All right, strategic planning update. I think Dan?
Thank you, Superintendent. We had a successful meeting December 3rd. It was quite fruitful, and our superintendent was there, David Freitas, Sarah O'Brien, Brad Oliver, B.J. Watts, and yours truly. I think we picked the right consultants. They have the experience. A couple things I want to emphasize, so we have the right conceptual framework. We are talking about a strategic plan for K-12 education in Indiana. And that might sound obvious, but it'll be important that people know what we're talking about. It's not a plan for the board. It's not a plan for the department. It's not a plan for one segment. It's for all of us, so we're rowing one direction and share some goals, some defined goals, not too many goals. It's also important to note that this will be a process. Strategic plans, there's some million of them out there, or billion maybe. Probably 90% or more are on shelves, and they were quite excited when they wrote them and got them on the shelf because the planning process was over. The idea here is this planning process would turn into a roadmap for our department, our budgeting, kind of personnel we hire, how we direct them, how we direct other resources. It would be a communication to districts around the state. This is what we're joining in together to accomplish around whatever goals, around standards, around improving human capitals, innovation, et cetera. So it would be something we could hold in common. We will measure results, working very closely together with leading and lagging indicators, and constantly renewing it. It'll be a living document. It won't be a static document. Finally, and I'll take questions, on January 15th, we have a retreat, and that will be facilitated retreat where we talk about the vision, mission, and develop goals. February 6th, Strategic Planning Committee will have a work session. February, March, we'll have consultations with key leaders in the field, such as the Principals Association, like a group like that deal every day, and various different aspects of K-12, whether it be parent groups, etc. March State Board meeting will present a draft of this, which we hope will be a pretty fine, fairly well fine-tuned draft. And then March, April, we'll conduct regional presentations about the direction we see and get input and hopefully buy-in and creative thoughts about how to move forward. And of course, this is a collaborative effort where we want everybody's thoughts, etc. So I'm very encouraged by it. Not sometimes, it's my experience working on boards and leading organizations when there's some big yeses burning inside all of us that we hold in common, petty differences and smaller issues go apart, and we join together to get something done that's great for our state and education. So thanks for everybody's participation. Any other comments are certainly welcome, and we'll take questions.
All right, on to the last agenda item. Underneath discussion and reports is School Accountability Review Panel updates. I think that's Deb and Molly.
Thank you. It's good to see you this afternoon again. It's been a long day. I guess it's fitting that I started and I get to end, right? I want to give you a brief update on what's happening with the Accountability Panel. As you're aware, the Accountability Panel continues to evaluate and provide recommendations concerning the new A through F model. The MOU, which established this panel, was set to expire December 31st, 2013. This MOU has been extended through 2014, so the panel will continue to do this work. The accountability panel did meet December 13th, last Friday. Next meeting is scheduled for approximately February, however, that's not been set at this point. At the December 13th meeting, wanted to give you a quick update on what actually occurred in that meeting. During the morning, we actually reviewed 2012 as well as 2013 performance-only data. We felt that this was a very interesting review process in which we're ripping the accountability model apart and looking at the two components of performance and growth separate. Because performance data is already available, we chose to start there. Also, we can then see how the performance data is influenced as we add growth data into this performance information. We also engaged experts. Damian Vedebenner was available for the December 13th meeting, so he did speak to the panel about growth as well as the use of growth in our accountability model and formula options to be used within the accountability model. Also wanted to note that we have engaged another national expert, Dr. Derek Briggs, with the University of Colorado. He's serving as an expert in accountability in general, as well as the use of growth in an accountability model, and we also expect to use him as our expert in the categorical improvement component of our model. So now I'll turn it over to Molly to elaborate on the afternoon work.
So thank you for the opportunity to give you an update on this. As Debbie said, it was a very good meeting. In the afternoon, we spent a lot of time talking about how growth is incorporated into an accountability model, the various ways of looking at growth, and recognizing that sometimes, and not sometimes actually, statistically speaking, it's harder to see growth for non-proficient students, than it is for students at current levels of proficiency, and even to keep students at high levels of proficiency. So we talked a lot about that and how do we account for that in an accountability model when we look at setting growth targets for students based on individual students, based on their own performance, and recognizing the different types of growth that are available. And then we also spent some time having some discussions around a value table, which is very important when looking at changing students growing across various categories. And when working on that value table, we asked the panel to get into small groups and to start discussing what do we value most. For example, the panel found that they really value a student moving from the lowest level of proficiency to even the highest, or the lowest level of non-proficiency, even up to the highest level of non-proficiency or proficiency, more than they do, a student just staying at a single proficiency level. The panel also valued staying at high levels of proficiency, so like a Pass Plus or a high level of Pass Plus, not dropping down into just a pass. And so a lot of robust discussion about that with the panel, and the panel filled in some elements of the value table, which Debbie and I are then taking back to work with our two experts, Damian Vedebenner and Derek Briggs. And at the next A through F accountability panel meeting, we will be presenting some data simulations around the various growth models so that the panel can start to make some very, very concrete recommendations on what that model is actually going to look like. So I think at this point, Debbie and I are welcome to answer any questions that you might have.
Do you anticipate having an update then in January?
Yes, I think that at the January 8th meeting, Debbie and I were probably going to be presenting a very detailed work plan that has some timelines as well as information to you, because we want to keep the board apprised at every step of the way how things are going, because we recognize that you'll be engaging in the rulemaking process. So at the January 8th meeting, we do plan on sharing that detailed work plan with you.
And I'd also like to comment that the MOU for the involvement of the panel was extended until December 31st, 2014. Yes.
Just a couple of questions. One, with regard to the conversations at ADAP, one of the things that I've been asked about, and I think I've shared this with you, Molly, this desire to recognize that contexts are different, districts are different, and so what that grade means inside of the community, like Carmel versus up north somewhere in Shipshewan or some other place, mean different things. Is there any discussion about whether or not the model can be nimble enough to at least allow for some degree of local indicator? I know that gets harder in terms of when you're trying to stay consistent, but any discussion around that?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Oliver. I think that at this point, we have not had specific discussions about how, say, a local indicator or ways of recognizing various climates that schools might be in. We have had discussions around how growth can be valued, especially for schools that might have large percentages of lower performing students coming into them. How do we reward those schools for moving those students in the right direction, recognizing that, again, if you have a student coming in who's 2 to 3 standard deviations away from, the norm, why don't we recognize that school if they're getting them even closer to the norm? So those discussions have definitely been had, but we're definitely leaving room, and that's where we're really engaging Derek Briggs as an accountability expert to talk about additional ways in which we might recognize, kind of
Other indicators, really.
other indicators, yes, other indicators and other ways of, I guess what in my old life at the higher ed level we would call mission differentiation, but that is kind of going to be, you're going to see that on the work plan as part of the discussion for the accountability panel.
And then we had talked at the November 13th meeting about the possibility at some point the board being able to actually engage directly with the panel. Is that still being considered or not considered, or?
I think, absolutely. I think, Superintendent Ritz, we talked about perhaps having, whether it's Superintendent Ritz and Dr. Yeager or even other members of the panel coming to join us, as we talk about the progress. And so when we start working on our work plan, we'll consult with Superintendent Ritz and Dr. Yeager as well about how we might fit them into the board updates.
Thank you. Andrea?
One of my concerns has been this sense that whatever it is we end up with creates incentive to do certain things and disincentive not to do other things. So has there been any discussion or thought about almost creating a menu of options that schools can pick and choose from? So for example, maybe scores on the national French exam would be an optional data indicator if they pride themselves on their French program, or comparably maybe adding an end-of-course assessment for government if the school decides that's what they pride themselves on. And on that same issue, I know the PSAT being added. I feel like we have enough College Board products already that are data indicators, and what we ought to do is create more variety of indicators for schools that have different strengths and gifts.
Sure. Debbie, do you want me to take that one, or do you want to? So again, as part of the discussions that we'll be having with Dr. Derek Briggs, it's going to be looking at perhaps what's been done in other states to potentially recognize some other indicators that might be included, as well. I think we're really still, and especially some of the discussion that was had earlier this morning and some of the points that you made, we're really still looking to see, are there ways that we can incorporate other indicators into the A through F model that aren't just, the standardized assessment, graduation rate, and college and career readiness. There are some other states that have done some things like that with varying levels of success, and so that's where, we're very interested in engaging Dr. Briggs in those discussions with the panel, and then really continuing those discussions with you as well. But very good points that are definitely will be taken under advisement.
Thank you very much. I don't have any listed items underneath board operations, so we're ready for adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.
I started to say no.
You say no?
Oh, Andrea.
Your
I didn't say no.
I am.
appreciation for your
We're leaving
liberal arts
Christmas
has
morning
been
at 6 a.m. on the flight.